Good morning, everyone, and happy St. Patrick's Day. Welcome to episode 11 of D.E.I. Deathwatch, the show that chronicles the downfall and the doubling down on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Hope you're all having a good Monday morning. A programming note before I begin. I am expecting, at some point today, maybe, a phone call dealing with my day job. Now, if that happens during the course of the broadcast, I will unfortunately have to pause and deal with that. It shouldn't take more than a couple of minutes, but I do have to deal with it if and when it happens. It could happen now, it could happen tomorrow. I don't know, so just a warning ahead of time. If that does happen, I will put on a pause screen, and I will try to get through it as quickly as I can and back to the broadcast. So just a forewarning on that. But elsewise, before I get into today's stories, who's joining me on this beautiful Monday morning? Walter Tomaszewski. Good morning, Scribe. What's green and stays out in your porch year-round? Patio furniture. Okay. Also a note that I've turned on the automatic volume control on my microphone. Jill Powers, over on the Midnight's Edge in the Morning Show, said that my mic sounded a little hot. And so in order to try to counteract that, I've turned on the automatic volume adjustment that StreamYard offers. If you guys notice anything goofy about my audio as we proceed, do let me know in the chat, and I will turn it back off again. Maybe that'll fix it. I guess we'll see. Snortapoopus, Cuber, good morning. Funtime Bats, good morning. Keeverdam, good morning to you, and thank you, Keeverdam, for providing the link to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, guys, that's pinned to the top of the chat box. If you guys are able to donate to that, please do so, but even if you can't, if you can share that out on social media, that would be appreciated. So thank you for that ahead of time, and thank you, Keeverdam, for providing the link. Adam Nixon, good morning. Advocatus Diaboli, good morning. Who else is here? Scrolling. Keep them doggies scrolling. Our best Remy, good morning. Who else? Anybody else? Alice Morgan, good morning to you. JMK, good morning. Draco Rincewind, good morning. John Trioxin, hello. Daryl Parnass, good morning. Who else is here? Is anybody else? That's everyone I see. If I missed you, if you're lurking, if you're in the future, good morning. All right, we got some stories to get to, so let's get to them. Let's start off with, how about the appeals court on Trump's DEI orders? Yes, so no matter how many times the courts attempt to stop, pause, or throw roadblocks into Trump's DEI backlash, they keep falling by the wayside. Appeals court lifts block on Trump's orders restricting diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. An appeals court on Friday lifted a block on executive orders seeking to end government support of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, handing the Trump administration a win after a string of setbacks defending President Donald Trump's agenda from dozens of lawsuits. Yeah, a setback that lasted, like 2 weeks or something? The decision from a 3-judge panel allows the orders to be enforced as a lawsuit challenging them plays out. The appeals court judges halted a nationwide injunction from U.S. District Court Adam Abelson in Baltimore. 2 of the judges on the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals wrote that Trump's anti-DEI push could eventually raise concerns about First Amendment rights, but said the judge's sweeping block went too far. Quote, "My vote should not be understood as agreement with the order's attack on efforts to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion," Judge Pamela Harris wrote. Why not? If you understood what diversity, equity, and inclusion aims to do, I think you'd probably oppose it. But then everybody keeps being captured by the simple dictionary definition of those words and not the context in which they are collected. Anyway, 2 of the panel's members were appointed by President Barack Obama, while the 3rd was appointed by Trump. Abelson had found the orders likely violated free speech rights and are unconstitutionally vague since they don't give a specific definition of DEI. Well, it's out there. It's, for crying out. Anybody who's paid attention to this for any period of time knows that DEI is about promoting people into positions of authority, not on the basis of their merit, but on the basis of their demographic fit. That's the core of it. That's the core of woke. That's the core of DEI. It's imagining that every disparity you can think of is evidence of oppression and suppression and something else going on. You know, the God of the gaps theory of statistical analysis. Therefore, some injustice is taking place, and the only way to right that wrong is to engineer a correction through illegal quotas. I don't know why that is so difficult a thing to understand, especially if we've got judges not understanding that either. But then these are the times we live in. Keeverdam, thank you so much. Due to still being sick, don't still be sick, stop being sick. I get to stay home from work and watch this live. Speaking of work, I hope everything's okay at yours. No, everything's fine. It's just I had to call a guy about a piece of information that I need that he needed to go look up somewhere, and now he's going to call me. Even though I gave my email address and I said, just email me the information. He's like, no, I'll call you back. I'm like, okay. So at some point, I might have to do that. Hopefully not during the broadcast, but you never know. Thank you, Keeverdam, so much. Hope you feel better soon. Rest up and enjoy your sort of forced time off, as it were. But moving on back to the article. Let's see. Abelson had found the orders, likely violated free speech, right? Trump signed an order his first day in office directing federal agencies, let me stop this video here, to terminate all equity-related grants or contracts. He signed a follow-up order requiring federal contractors to certify that they don't promote DEI. The city of Baltimore and other groups sued the Trump administration, arguing the executive orders are an unconstitutional overreach of presidential authority. Well, maybe they are. I'm not a constitutional scholar or lawyer. But if they are, guess whose job it is to constrain the powers of the executive? Congress. Do you think Congress is going to do that? I doubt it. The Justice Department has argued that the president was targeting only DEI programs that violate federal civil rights laws. Government attorneys said the administration should be able to align federal spending with the president's priorities. Well, if a DEI program in the federal government violates Title VI, Title VII, or elsewise, then it should not be in existence because it violates federal law. So if you have grant programs that are set aside specifically for people and businesses on the basis of the race and or gender and or religion or whatever else of the owner of said business, here's the thing. In every situation where they talk about grants for this demographic or that demographic, imagine if they had a grant that was specifically for a religious group only. Only this religious group, this religious demographic could take advantage of this grant, of this money. The one thing out of the litany of things you're not allowed to discriminate on the basis of, religion, rarely ever comes up in DEI arguments, even though they sit on equal legal footing as every other demographic they talk about. But if you saw a business promoting one particular religion over another, you'd never hear the end of it. But one race, one gender, or excluding one race or one gender, it's perfectly fine. Efforts to increase diversity long have been under attack by Republicans, who contend the measures threaten merit-based hiring. They do. Promotion and education opportunities for white people. Well, it's not just about white people. It's about violating the law. Look, if you discriminate in favor of someone or you discriminate against someone, it's still a violation of the law, right? I mean, you could say Republicans who contend the measures threaten merit-based hiring, promotion, and educational opportunities for Asian people, for black people, for men, for women. Because in order to achieve this purported parity they're looking for, they would need to start making decisions about, if we have too many of that demographic, then it looks bad. And that's why we have those laws from the 60s. Supporters say the programs help institutions meet the needs of increasingly diverse populations while addressing the lasting impacts of systemic racism. Right, you're trying to right the wrongs of the past by engineering an outcome of aesthetics today. Yeah. Their purpose was to foster equitable environments in businesses and schools, especially for historically marginalized communities. Researchers say DEI initiatives date back to the 1960s, but they expanded in 2020 during increased calls for racial justice. Well, they keep using 2020 and the advent of George Floyd as their excuse, but what does George Floyd's death have to do with hiring practices at HP? I still don't know, but I've been told that they're very important. In addition to the mayor and the Baltimore City Council, the plaintiffs include the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education. I know they have a vested interest. The American Association of University Professors and the Restaurant Opportunities Centers United, which represent restaurant workers across the country. Interesting collection of organizations there, but I'll withhold comment. But otherwise, what's going on over in the chat here real quick before I get too distracted? Yes, best wishes to Keeverdam. Hydrate. Feel better. Sleep is the best medicine. Snortopoopas, apparently Biden's handlers didn't overreach anything. I know, right? Yeah, see, I actually put this out on Twitter today. Somebody was complaining about Trump's executive orders and actions, especially with the deportation of gang members and such. And I was just kind of like, well, hey, there's two possibilities here. Either Trump is working within the boundaries of executive power, or he's abusing executive power and overreaching past it. Either way, whose job is it, again, to constrain the executive? Because so far, all we've had is like district judges putting injunctions and band-aids or temporary stops on his movements. And some of those judges' decisions themselves are sort of legally suspect as to whether or not a district court judge can just halt the executive branch all by its lonesome. But that aside, it's all just temporary. Who should be doing the work? Now, I understand the Democrats are basically out of power at this point, but instead of just whining and moaning about it, they should be at least proposing legislation to constrain the executive. Well, golly gee, Donald Trump found a loophole or a weakness in existing law that allowed him to try to use the executive authority to do this thing. Maybe we shouldn't have that happen. Golly, how shall we plug up that hole in the law? Oh, maybe it should go to the legislature. I don't know, the people who write the laws or amend the Constitution or something. Do we hear any of that? No, we hear a bunch of politicians complaining about what Trump is doing, but are they taking any substantive action? Oh, I said the word. I said the word. Okay, you know what that... But anyway, that's a whole other argument. Like I said before, I'm glad, in a way, that Trump is pushing the boundaries of what the executive can or cannot do, because this shows just how much power the executive has or should not have. Question is, if you think he shouldn't have, what are you doing about it? And if you're just saying it's bad, but you're not doing anything to stop the bad from happening in the future, that probably just means you're waiting for your turn at the wheel to use those toys for yourself. And that is just hypocritical. But shall I expect anything better from politicians? Hope springs eternal. Also, who springs eternal? Kirsten Scholl over on X. Good morning. Hope you're doing well, Kirsten. And let's move on to our next story. This just sounded funny to me when I read the headline. Mock sit-in. How do you have a mock sit-in? I mean, if it's a mock sit-in, it's effectively nothing, right? But anyway, mock sit-in canceled at Alabama College due to fear of violating DEI law, says lawsuit. I don't know what this story is. The headline caught my attention. Let's find out. The effects of an Alabama anti-DEI law have cascaded beyond the classroom and are affecting the lives of many students and professors, according to 6 plaintiffs behind a federal lawsuit suing the University of Alabama System Board of Trustees and Governor Kay Ivey. That's a long sentence. The lawsuit is an attempt to roll back the impacts of a state law that bans colleges from promoting quote-unquote divisive concepts. That's my misread. Divisive concepts. It comes amid a national effort by President Donald Trump to stop colleges from continuing DEI practices. Okay. Plaintiffs say normal educational activities, such as a mock sit-in for a class project, have been stifled by an administration afraid of running afoul of the state law. Well, I think you should be afraid of running afoul of the law, but let's hear. Quote, campus as a whole feels sort of resentful toward the state for the bill, unquote. Isabella Campos, a plaintiff and political science student at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, told AL.com. All right. All this build-up, let's get to the pitch, shall we? On January 14th, students and professors at the system's Tuscaloosa and Birmingham campuses sued, saying that the law violates their constitutional rights, including the First Amendment. All right. In response to the complaint, the university said that plaintiffs haven't adequately demonstrated that they or other people are specifically harmed by the new law. The plaintiffs have asked for an immediate injunction on the law. What's their argument? How is their First Amendment rights being curtailed by this? The legislation, SB 129, prohibits state-funded programs that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, including at colleges and universities. Okay. colleges around the state shuttered DEI offices. At Auburn and University of Alabama, the areas designated for LGBTQ students closed. The Black Student Union space was closed at University of Alabama. Plaintiff Miguel Luna, a junior studying political science and history at UAB, told AL.com that the lawsuit isn't about pushing an agenda. Okay, quote, "We're just trying to ensure that everyone has a seat at the table." I've heard that phrase a zillion times over the last 8 years. It usually just means lowering the standards of entry. But anyway, and that we can all be equitable in how we're moving, Luna said. I think I just point proven. He said classifying topics such as race as divisive is dangerous because, quote, "different communities face disproportionate issues, and these issues still affect a lot of us today," unquote. Hey, Miguel, you might want to go get your master's first. Just get out of college, have your actually know what you're talking about before you just like spout off a whole bunch of regurgitated nonsense. How are your rights being curtailed? What in the law? I mean, I'm willing to stipulate the possibility because I've read state laws before that are way too ambiguous in their language, right? There was I think it was California, this is a couple of years ago. Somebody introduced a bill, I think it was California. I don't think it passed. That said, thou shalt not promote anything involving diversity, equity, or inclusion on campus, full stop. And I'm just like, well, what if the word, say, diversity is used in its correct context in some kind of publication for some group or organization or activity on campus? Does that mean that can't happen because it uses the word? It has to be shut down? Like, this is why you have to get very specific about the law, right? And the thing is that you shouldn't have to in these cases because the law has already been written. You can't have discrimination on the basis of race or sex or religion in any organization accepting federal funding, right? And you can't have such discrimination happening in workplaces on the basis of employment. All these things were already in the law back in the 60s. The DEI add-ons they keep putting up there, I think, are unnecessary. And it does confuse the issue, depending on how you word the law. You should just say, we're going to enforce Title VI as written. We're going to enforce Title VII as written. In truth, the whole DEI additions to this stuff kind of confuse the issue. You should just go back to basics. But anyway, the plaintiffs believe SB 129, quote, was enacted at least in part with the purpose of discriminating against black people, unquote. Well, of course you do. Because you follow a woke ideology that says that there's only one race that can be victimized in this world on the basis of discrimination. You don't see discrimination in and of itself, good, bad, or otherwise, as the problem for any particular demographic. It's only one. You might want to think about that. They say, quote, divisive concepts, unquote, is too ambiguous for faculty and students to follow. That I agree with. Because what if you have an art show that challenges social norms or something? Or someone says it does. Let's put it that way. Someone says it does. I mean, that's divisive. You have a disagreement. Does that mean that activity on campus has to be outlawed? This is why the law really needs to just lean on established precedent and what's already in the Constitution. There be dragons with this. So in this instance, the divisive concepts thing, that is too ambiguous. Let's see. The defendants argue the law is clear and states in everyday English the acts are prohibited. The acts that are prohibited. Okay. Article, tell me where. Not going to? Okay. UA's guidance for faculty includes adding a disclaimer on their class syllabus, a document which outlines class goals, assignments, and outcomes. The professors claim the recommended disclaimer isn't enough, including telling students they, quote, may present difficult, objectionable, or controversial topics for consideration, but will do so through an objective, scholarly lens, unquote. Well, what's wrong with that? I mean, if I'm presenting Huckleberry Finn to a literature class, I start off by saying, a lot of the attitudes, words, and concepts used in this book are an element of their time, but we're going to read it as it is, and if we have questions about it, I will try to explain them in the context in which they occurred, that kind of thing. What else could you do? According to the complaint, this included sensitive topics such as discrimination during the Holocaust. Why I don't understand the problem there. I mean, personally, I don't think you should have to put a trigger warning in front of any of this stuff, but if you want to put a disclaimer up ahead of time saying, hey guys, we're going to be talking about some pretty dark stuff, just so you know. So get ready for it, Or if that's going to bother you, maybe you should switch classes or something. I don't know. UAB students, according to the complaint, quote, observed that professors have been less willing to share their opinions, unquote. No, it's not their opinions. It's their ideology. Share their opinions? No. They're less willing to share their ideology on the chance that they might get fired, for promoting discriminatory activities and such. Anyway, the professors would stop mid-sentence or comment, quote, I could go to jail for saying this, unquote. Yeah, I doubt that. The university said in its response that the Alabama Constitution is colorblind, so they forbid, quote, the professors it pays to teach its curriculum from compelling students at its universities to affirm, as part of their coursework, that white students are inherently superior to black students, that Jewish students should be discriminated against, and that Germans are inherently racist, unquote. Well, yeah. The university said in its response. Well, yeah, you're not supposed to. Is that what the professors are stopping themselves from doing? For making declarations about the inherent quality of people on the basis of non-determinative factors? I mean, if that's what's happening, then I guess, yeah, that would be a problem for someone that wants to teach at a organization that accepts federal funding. One of the plaintiffs, Cassandra Simon, is an associate professor at UA School of Social Work. She said in the past, her students watch documentaries such as Eyes on the Prize about the civil rights movement. Students expressed, quote, feelings of anger, guilt, complicity, and shame after watching the movie, which Simon worried may run afoul of SB 129. Okay, well, again, divisive concepts. They may have to re-examine that, because when you get into the weeds on that term, that could be a problem. Legally speaking, not like in real life, but just if you put it that vaguely. But feelings of anger, guilt, complicity. Why would students today feel complicit in the crimes during the civil rights era? Why? Why would they feel that way? Anger? Yeah, I mean, when I saw documentaries about how people treated each other during those times, I felt angry. I felt angry that people treated each other that way. Guilt? For what? Complicity? What? Shame? For what? You didn't do anything wrong. Why are your students feeling like they are complicit in the events of the civil rights era? University lawyers responded that an, quote, objectively reasonable professor would have no reason to think that merely presenting and discussing Eyes on the Prize violates any provision of the law. Maybe? I don't know. Divisive concept. The civil rights era was, yeah, I don't know. This is why it goes back to the courts. This is why you have to litigate this stuff out, to make sure there aren't as many loopholes as possible. Now, true, a reasonable person would not see a problem with showing a documentary about the civil rights era and thinking, I violated the law. But that's what you get these rules lawyers in here for. And ultimately, it's going to make, hopefully, a more understandable and concise law over time. Because if you have these worrywarts making a big dramatic show over, oh, I can't show this documentary because it's divisive. Well, they may be a worrywart, they may be a squeaky wheel, but legally speaking, do they at least have a point that there's an ambiguity there that needs to be cleared up? Don't get me wrong. I obviously, yes, I think that these professors and students are, clutching their pearls at nothing. But in the long run, this is why we have to have this process, to weed out those loopholes, those ambiguities, those possible positions for abuse. I mean, what if somebody said, oh, presenting Donald Trump as a good president is a divisive concept? Just remember, good for the goose, good for the gander. When students planned a sit-in, I thought it was a mock sit-in, a sit-in for a project in her class in November, Simon received an email from the school's dean saying that the sit-in should be canceled, okay? The email quoted a section of the faculty handbook that said failure to comply could lead to, quote, progressive disciplinary actions up to and including termination, unquote. The event was canceled 2 hours before it began, according to reporting from the Crimson White. The Crimson White, okay. What does that have to do with the law? What? Okay, how did the sit-in violate... What? Quote, are we going to get you fired because we chose to do this, unquote, students have asked Simon. Okay. She said students are normally engaged and excited to learn about unfamiliar topics. Now they've backtracked on sensitive issues. Sure they have. Quote, students are not getting a complete comprehensive education when we have these kinds of limitations placed on us, Simon told him. Wait a second. What about the SB law, SB 129, prevented you or had the school tell you to stop this? What was the sit-in for? How is it going to be carried out? What? Okay, the entire core of this story is not explained. What was the dean's concerns over the sit-in? The email quoted a section of the faculty handbook that said failure to comply. Well, no, why should it be canceled? When students planned a sit-in for a project, was it going to block fire exits? Was there some other safety concern or something else going on that this was going to be disruptive to campus life? What does that have to do with SB 129? I don't know. The article doesn't say. So the entire purpose of this article, the headline, mock sit-in canceled due to fear of violating... How? What fear was there that was violating a DEI law? We're not told. Thanks so much. What was it, AL.com? Yeah, AL.com. Great reporting there. Explains nothing. Tells us nothing. Let's see. Abdicast Diaboli. The concern was when people pointed out a sit-in as a project, they would have had a hard time saying, no, we aren't making activists. Yeah, exactly. As a class project, we're going to stage a sit-in, just so you know what it's like, to get you ready for future events. Nonsense. What a nonsense article. I was waiting for the big reveal. What happened? How did this planned sit-in potentially, or even if you're extrapolating from the language, violate the law? Don't even know what the dean's concern was. Tier Alexander, isn't college is where ideas should be challenged? If I was in an ethnic class or American history class and they wanted to show Birth of a Nation as part of a lesson being taught, I wouldn't mind. Yeah, this is the thing. And if the phrase divisive concepts is left as ambiguous as is implied by that article, of course, at this point, I have to question the legitimacy of the telling of that story because the author didn't even bother explaining what the sit-in thing was about. But if it's something as ambiguous as that, a divisive concept, then, yeah, if somebody decides to go literally with the law and say, oh, you know, you showed Song of the South in your classroom, or you played clips from it, that's divisive because that's a racist movie. Again, this is why you have to be very careful with the language. But ultimately, here's the thing. The law already exists. Okay? First Amendment rights, that's a whole other different thing. Is your organization discriminating in access and opportunity to activities and programs if you accept federal funding? If you accept federal funding, so if a teacher decides to show Birth of a Nation, that should be fine all by itself, right? As long as it's like, here's a movie for historical purposes and or for educational purposes, as you say. Now, if the teacher then said, only black students will be allowed to watch this event, that would be violating the law. Simply playing the movie should not, in and of itself, be a violation of the law, unless there's some other thing I'm missing here. So, yeah, we're getting too far in the weeds with some of this DEI legislation. I think a lot of it is ultimately unnecessary and, an example here, overly confuses the issue and allows a whole bunch of people to claim victimhood in places where they wouldn't otherwise have to or be able to. Just rely on Title VI and Title VII and all the derivative legislation thereof. That's all it should be. We shouldn't have to create new law. It's the existing laws not being enforced correctly in the first place. That's why. All this extra legislation focusing specifically on DEI, it's unnecessary. Really, I think it really is unnecessary. DEI is just a label. It's just a label on old behaviors that were already outlawed that just need to be enforced. But we'll see what they decide to do. Let's see. Let's also look at another story claiming that DEI policy has canceled something. I should probably muted myself for that. I got to clear my throat. Trump administration DEI order forces cancellation of concert with students. Okay, so unlike the sit-in story, will we actually get an explanation as to how a concert potentially violated the DEI order? Let's find out. The United States Marine Band was founded in 1798. 1798. Wasn't that the same year that the Alien Enemies Act or whatever that Trump has been using the last few days to deport gang members? Coincidence? I think not. Thomas Jefferson gave it its nickname, the President's Own. Today, 135 Marines still perform the score of the White House from parties to inaugurations. So there was excitement last year when the Marines judged a contest for teenage musicians. The winners would perform with the band. Okay, 30 students were chosen. The concert was scheduled, but last month it was canceled. President Trump had issued his executive order against diversity programs, and the young musicians were Black, Hispanic, Indian, and Asian. Because they were silenced, many wanted to hear them, including veterans of military bands who gathered in an improvised orchestra of equity that you might call America's own. Wait a second. Hold on. I feel like there are several details we're not being given here. But let's continue. Maybe things will be made clear. This past Sunday at the Music Center at Strathmore near Washington, 22 students who had lost their chance to play tuned up with the military band veterans for the concert that was not meant to be heard. I have a distinct feeling that's not what happened here. This music had been planned for this canceled concert. Quote, Nobles of the Mystic Shrine by John Philip Sousa. Sousa directed the Marine Band a century and a half ago and composed Stars and Stripes Forever, the great classic in the Songbook of Patriots. Rishabh Jain, we're a land that prides itself on being the land of the free, the home of the brave, and I believe that just as much as anyone else does. But for that, we need these different perspectives. We need to see how others think. Whoops. That's my phone going off. Pardon me 1 second. That's not the phone call. This is something else. What is it? Come on. Oh, okay. That's just confirming another thing. All right. Pardon me. My apologies. How many perspectives do you need to follow sheet music? I don't know. I don't know. What does a different perspective have to do with following sheet music? Okay, 18-year-old Rishabh Jain was among the students barred from playing with the Marines. How was he barred? Who barred him from playing with the Marines? What are you talking about? You have to explain this. By what mechanism was this kid barred from playing with the Marines? No, I don't want to hear more. No, tell me why. Ain't nothing but a heartbreak. Ain't nothing but a mistake. Tell me why. Okay. I'm scrolling down because I'm trying to get past all the fluff into some kind of explanation of what happened. Okay. Let's see. Zakiya McClenny. Zakiya was chosen. She and all the contestants had been organized by a Chicago-based nonprofit called Equity Arc. There's a red flag already, which connects student musicians of color with mentors and opportunities. And here's why. American orchestras today are 80% white, 11% Asian, 5% Hispanic, and 2% black. No wonder that in 2022, Equity Arc's executive director got an unexpected call. Okay, now we're into an interview. Scott Pelley, the Marines called you? Stanford Thompson, yes. They called Stanford Thompson to ask how the band could reach out to musicians of color. It's part of the band's mission to educate youth. No, it's part of the band's mission to apparently be discriminatory on the basis of race. Stanford Thompson. So in that phone call with the Marine Band, I shared with them a lot of ideas, a lot that we have learned as an organization. And when I got off the phone, it was crazy. It was like, wait, let me call this guy back because I should be offering a way or some ideas that Equity Arc and the Marine Band could work together, unquote. We identified this high school age, this pre-college age, where a lot of musicians of color drop off. We came up with the idea of, can we bring a select group that we would audition through a competitive process? Stop. Stop right there. Can we bring in a select group that we would audition through a competitive process? Yeah, selected on the basis of what? Can we bring a select group that we'd audition through a competitive process to Washington to be able to spend a couple of days with the band? The couple of days were supposed to look like this. Top music students like Zakiah McClenny learning from the best. Their Wind Symphony was set for this May 4th until President Trump's executive order banning programs for diversity. No, banning programs for racial discrimination. We really need to start changing the language on this. Changing it to what it actually means. Diversity means racial and gender discrimination, primarily. Sometimes orientation, but oftentimes race and gender. Banning programs for discrimination. That's what it should be. People should start using the correct words to describe these programs. Quoting President Trump, "We've ended the tyranny of so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion policies all across the entire federal government and indeed the private sector and our military, and our country will be woke no longer," unquote. The president says he is building a, quote, colorblind, merit-based society, a reaction to what many saw as progressive politics gone too far. Many? Yeah, a lot of people, like, I don't know, the lawmakers of the 1960s. His order was comprehensive, calling diversity programs, quote, illegal and immoral discrimination and quote, immense public waste, unquote. But that executive order is just the beginning. All across the government, President Trump is rolling back 60 years of discrimination protections for women, older Americans, the disabled, and people of color. 60 years of discrimination protections? Where? Trump rescinded President Johnson's 1965 ban on employment bias. What? President Johnson's 1965 ban on employment bias. Well, he rescinded Title VII? What are you talking about? He closed the Social Security Office of Civil Rights and fired leaders of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or EEOC, which investigates bias in the workplace. Yeah, you know why he fired those guys? Because they weren't doing their jobs. Because the last 10 years or more have let companies and organizations run rampant over the Constitution and civil rights law. That's probably why. Okay, but you're not going to give us any other context. Johnson's 1965 ban on employment. I thought I heard something about this, but it's been so lightly done in the news media. Let's see. Let's read what the president had to say on this. By the authority vested in me as the president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States is hereby ordered. Okay, roughly 60 years after the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, critical and influential institutions of American society, including the federal government, major corporations, financial institutions, the medical industry, large commercial airlines, law enforcement agencies, and institutions of higher learning, have adopted and actively used dangerous, demeaning, and immoral race and sex-based preferences under the guise of so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion, or diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. You forgot belonging. You really did forget belonging. Where's the... Let's see. 1994. I'm reading through something off screen. I apologize, guys. Okay. Executive Order 11246 of September 24th, 1965 is hereby revoked. For 90 days from the date of this order, federal contractors may continue to comply with the regulatory scheme in effect on January 20th, 2025. I don't know what that means. It doesn't tell me. And of course, this article doesn't tell me either. Ban on employment bias. Does that rescind Title VII? Okay, anyway. Carrie Dominguez. Who's Carrie Dominguez? I don't know. I think we're at a pivotal moment in our society, and we have to make a decision as to which way we want to go. Carrie Dominguez chaired the EEOC for George W. Bush. Her family fled Cuba when she was 12. The second thing means nothing to me as opposed to the first thing. Scott Pelley. The argument behind the executive order is that America has eliminated racism. What? Wait. Stop. Right. What?
What? What is that? What the fuck is that?
Okay, this is Scott Pelley, the interviewer at 60 Minutes. I'm quoting him. The argument behind the executive order is that America has eliminated racism, that no one in this country is held back by race any longer. Who ever said that? What are you What? Carrie Dominguez, the data would not support that. Okay, so what's the solution to this, Scott Pelley? Rampant racial discrimination in employment and opportunities in order to correct that? What planet are you on? Thankfully, you're not on the moon, where I live. The data, Dominguez told us, shows that the EEOC handles around 100,000 discrimination claims from Americans each year. Really? Okay, well, how about all the companies that have been rampantly discriminating against people in employment decisions for the last decade or more? Bring any lawsuits against them recently? Scott Pelley, the executive order calls the kinds of programs that you used to enforce, quote, immoral, unquote. So Carrie Dominguez is one of those fired EEOC workers. She thought DEI was a good thing. Well, I'm glad she no longer has her job. Carrie Dominguez, quote, I believe what is immoral is to deny people opportunities. You know what, Carrie? I agree. I agree that it is immoral to deny people opportunities on the basis of their race or their gender or their religion or their country of origin. I agree. So why are you defending DEI? I have witnessed individuals who have beautiful resumes. I use the best paper as well. And font style, I do. And they get an interview. They come in, using a wheelchair, and all of a sudden the opportunity is gone. Well, if the part of the job requirement is, can you lift and carry 20 pounds of weight? It might be an issue. Can you climb stairs? It's the possibility. Denying people opportunities because of that lack of fairness is immoral. And then this is her pause. Immoral pause. That's the immoral part. What are you talking about? We're not talking about people in wheelchairs. We're talking about denying people opportunities on the basis of their race or their gender or sometimes their orientation. Okay? Or elevating people on the basis of their race, their gender, or their orientation. It's all discrimination, Carrie. It's all illegal discrimination. You have no idea what you're talking about. Fairness aside, in this email, the Marine Band's commanding officer wrote Equity Arc Stan Thompson, quote, as long as the executive order is in place, we will not be able to reschedule, unquote. I am really sorry to be the bearer of bad news. I don't know why you did two different quotes there. Stanford Thompson, my first thought was helplessness in a way and heartbreak. Scott Pelley, did you have the sense that the concert was canceled because of the color of your skin? Rishabh Jain, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't think of another reason, really. I had prepared, I had done everything I could to be at the top. And being Indian, I thought, yeah, what other reason would there be? Because you arrived at your position in a racist and discriminatory fashion, I'm afraid, my boy. That's just what happened. That's what happened. You were the recipient of positive discrimination. An organization that's focused on excluding white people from musical opportunities you benefited from. You were picked for your race into the organization that elevated you to this circumstance. You think that you were discriminated against in this opportunity because of your race? No, you're discriminated in favor of because of your race. Which is worse in your mind? Listen to what you are saying. Any questions were answered this past week. The students gathered in Washington for rehearsals and the performance. 60 Minutes did what we often do. Covered costs of plane tickets and travel to bring all of our interviewees to one place. Oh, so you paid your interview subjects. Okay. All right. Equity Arc decided to book the rehearsal space and the concert hall and try to replace the absent Marine Band, which turned out to be easy. I don't know that I want to keep reading the story because it goes on for a long time. But the short version is these kids are probably very good musicians. I'm not going to argue that they're not good musicians. That's beside the point. The fact is, the only reason that they had this opportunity granted to them in the first place is because of their race. That's it. And the organization and the program that received federal funding or support, it got canceled because it is based on discrimination in the first place. Fruit of the poison tree. And unfortunately, these kids lose out on that opportunity, not because of their race, but because they are the beneficiaries of a racist organization. Equity Arc favors people on the basis of their race. Full stop. They say so themselves. So either we are operating on a basis of merit or we're not. So I feel sorry for those kids. They were lied to. But they need to start thinking about exactly what brought them to that place in the first place. Racism. They benefited from racism. All right. Let's go over to the chat real quick before I completely lose my mind. Let's see. T. Alexander. But again, why are we mollycoddling college students? Fire makes steel stronger. This is why we have weaknesses in college today. There is no fire. Yeah, you can only velvet glove people so much before they just expect velvet all the time. Let's see. Who else we got here? Sure You Gospel. I say that right? Sure You? Or Sure Yao? Sure Yao? Let me know. I like learning how to pronounce things correctly. College has become a massive, expensive joke. Yeah, you're not kidding. I think I just barely dodged the proverbial bullet when I graduated when I did back in the early 2000s. Because it was just a few years after that time, maybe 4 or 5 years, where things started going absolutely bedlam. And so I think I just got away with it. Let's see. Where do we see here? Advocatus. The concern was when people pointed out I already read that. Okay. Sometimes StreamYard does not have the chat scroll in time with the rest of the chat, so I have to scroll all the way down. Sure You Gospel? Okay. I got it right. Thanks so much. Susannu a la Richard. I don't know if my brain is acting up again or if this writing just doesn't understand the importance of context. We're seeing a lot of that lately, aren't we? Like the first article about the sit-in doesn't even explain it. And then about why was this thing canceled? Do they not see the contradiction in their own words? 60 Minutes. Well, obviously this executive order says racism is over with. Really? Is that what it does? Wow, Scott Pelley. Thanks so much for your years of genius analytical work. Anyway, and Angela Arriaga. Good morning, and hello, Angela. And happy St. Patrick's Day to you too. I kept my little leprechaun avatar up just for the occasion. The Dead Man. The problem is these don't see these policies as racism. They think they're doing something good. That's what they've been fooled into thinking. They've been fooled into thinking that to put right what once went wrong, you have to fight fire with fire. That you have to do positive discrimination to balance the scales. And the only way that you can tell that you've balanced the scales is by demographic fit and parity on a statistical level. And they talked about it in that article. They said, 80% of bands are white. So that's obviously a disparity, and that's racism. The fact that 80% of members of bands are white means that racism is present. This is the woke ideology. If you see a disparity, you see an injustice. And if you see an injustice, the only way to correct it is to artificially manufacture an equitable outcome to that disparity. Even if the cause of said disparity has little to nothing to do with actual racism and is just the result of general population demographics, that's beside the point. If you see a disparity, that's an inequity, and that has to be solved. And so this Equity Arc organization practices overt racial discrimination in its opportunities to those that they bring in, and then pushes them onto other organizations in order to correct the problem. And this brings me back to something that I talked about on the last DEI Deathwatch. So we did a story. Let me make sure I've got this lined up here. Pardon me one second. I need to find my media assets here. This is going to be a little goofy because I have an overlay. But there was an organization mentioned in a story I did on last Friday called the PhD Project. So Trump and the DOJ are starting to go after 50 different colleges and universities who, some or all of them, I forget if exactly all of them, but a good portion of them were associated with something called the PhD Project. Now, just for reference's sake, let's take a look at what the PhD Project looks like today on their website. Let's look at the language that they use on their website today. Let me scroll over to that and turn that off there, and then share this for everyone's edification. So this is the PhD Project. Enriching education for all. All right. Our vision, a broader talent pipeline of current and future business leaders committed to excellence and each other. Our mission, to expand the pool of workplace talent by developing business school faculty who encourage, mentor, and support tomorrow's leaders. Our programs leverage our expansive network of partners, professionals, and universities so they can continue to help individuals earn their PhDs to teach and inspire the next generation of business leaders. Wow. That looks great, doesn't it? Well, that looks great. Now, what if we look at their website, I don't know, back in 2023? Yeah, what's our vision back then? A significantly larger talent pipeline of Black/African Americans, Latinx, Hispanic Americans, and Native Americans for business leadership positions. Yeah. And I have also acquired, because they still have them posted on their website, their annual reports going back to 2016. Their 2024 report isn't out yet, but in each and every annual report from 2023 back, they explicitly talk about being a race-based, racially discriminatory organization. But all of a sudden, in the current iteration of their website and their materials, I'm sure going forward, I can't wait till their 2024 report comes out. Yeah. They made no bones about what their focus was up until about, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. It's hard to say. I haven't looked at every instance of the Wayback Machine to see when their website changed. But yeah. So this is in part why the federal government is looking into these colleges that have worked with this program. Because sort of like Hive Diversity, PhD Project would be a third-party sort of firewalled filter organization for universities. So universities don't have to make certain admissions decisions on paper. They can let this third party do it for them and then refer students to their admissions program who are already selected on the basis of certain elements that the university might otherwise fall into some trouble for if they were to do it themselves. This is how you do DEI by proxy. This is how you do affirmative action by proxy. And so PhD Project, they've since scrubbed their website of any particular mentioning of specific races or genders or nationalities or ethnicities or anything. But yeah. Just wanted to do a little update on that, a little extra, because I was curious about this PhD project, and I wanted to know what exactly they were about. Well, they're about this very scrubbed language now, but they weren't so much very long ago. So there's that as a little update. And I got one more story for you. This is a long article, though. Oh, man, do I want to do this? Yeah, that's a lot of... Maybe I should do this separately or just post this separately otherwise. Yeah, I'm going to skip that one. I had something else I wanted to show, but it's a very long opinion piece, and I'm already running out of gas. I'm actually working on. I'm fighting a headache right now, so I want to try to wrap things up. Let's do this one instead. This might be a good closer. Knoxville's United Way quietly eliminated its DEI office after equity officer complained of racism. So the equity officer complained of racism, and then they eliminated their DEI office. Is that the chain of events? Let's find out. As companies and government agencies across the country grapple with the politics of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, the United Way of Greater Knoxville, which previously boasted about its DEI structure, has long since quietly stopped its work. The nonprofit has gone without a chief equity officer since early 2023. Wait, 2023? That's before Trump became president. How could that happen? Early 2020, heck, was that before the affirmative action decision? Uh-oh. The nonprofit has gone without a chief equity officer since early 2023 when it fired Yashika Smith, a black woman, shortly after she filed a racial discrimination complaint with the agency's Human Resources Office and the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Oh, okay. So she's the chief equity officer, and then they were racist against her? How so? She says her supervisor questioned her and another black employee about how much they were working from home instead of the office. Okay, were they the only ones that were questioned about this? United Way investigated Smith's claim and deemed it unfounded, interim CEO Crystal Armstrong Brown told Knox News. Well, I mean, if they're investigating themselves, that's not always reliable, but okay. Afterwards, she said, United Way leaders had held meetings to discuss Smith's job performance, which managers say had become an issue. Okay. Ultimately, the United Way paid Smith $104,000. Wait. So you say she's been, what, maybe, I'm just guessing here, she's been abusing her work from home privileges too much, and you fire her, and she says you discriminated against me, so you pay her $104,000 even though the claims were unfounded? Okay. Ultimately, United Way paid Smith $104,000 in a settlement to leave the organization. Here's $100,000, leave. Okay, that would have been the end of it, but after receiving the payment, Smith filed for unemployment benefits, and the United Way asked the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development to rule the nonprofit did not need to pay. After a 2-day hearing, an officer ruled against the United Way's objection, requiring the organization to pay Smith's unemployment insurance. So, she does a lousy job, she gets fired, she claims racism, gets a payoff of $104,000 to leave a job she's already been fired from, and on top of that, the employer that she did the lousy job for has to pay her unemployment. What a country. Knox News obtained a copy of the agency's decision and recordings of the hearing. Smith declined to comment for this story. Armstrong Brown told Knox News the organization doesn't have dedicated DEI positions any longer, but it has embedded those practices and lessons into its work in the community more so than it has in years. Okay. Like countless organizations, the United Way hired a DEI expert. Yeah, a DEI expert following the national racial reckoning after the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. You mean after George Floyd died while in Chauvin's custody, but that's a whole other story. More pressing, though, was the local turmoil from the shooting deaths in 2021 of 5 black teenagers, all of them students at Austin East Magnet High School. One of the students, Anthony Thompson Jr., was shot and killed by a Knoxville police officer. What does any of that have to do with the job performance of a DEI officer at the United Way 2 years after the fact? Okay, it was in that spirit, the spirit of tragedy, that the United Way praised Smith when it announced her initial hire in October of 2021. Quote, Yashika is leading our organizational collaborative journey to normalize and organize racial equity and inclusion into the fabric of who we are and how we show up as an organization. We are confident she will make an incredible impact on our team, unquote, the company wrote in a Facebook post announcing her hire. It's almost like she was hired in a process of tokenism or something. It's almost like you used her as a propaganda tool to show just how virtuous you were. Or something. Well, she got $104,000 plus unemployment for it. So. Similarly, in February 2022, then CEO Matt Ryerson told Knox News that United Way created a DEI position so the organization could better focus on equitable systems internally and externally. How's that working out for you? Quote, when we talked to her, we said, we need you on our team because we want to dive into more meaningful work in our community, but it's got to be equitable. It has to be equitable for Black families that historically have been devastated in this community. And we still have one of the highest rates of African American poverty in the entire country. And if we ignore that, then we're not doing our work. So we have to recognize, where's that coming from? What is the core to that? And how do we start moving that issue? So we hired somebody to help us think through every one of those things. Because if you don't, it's really easy to fund the stuff that's always been funded. And if you look at a statistic like Black poverty rate and how high it is, we can say, hey, we've done some good work, but we missed something. So we needed somebody on our team that is constantly looking at all of our work through that lens and saying, let's not miss it again, unquote. Okay. I don't know the answer to this. Maybe the article will answer it for me. What special knowledge or expertise did this lady bring to the table? Why was she hired for this job? Are you going to tell us? You're not going to tell us, are you? Okay. Okay. So we have no idea. We have no idea why she was hired in the first place. Okay. I'm going to read a little bit more of this, but like I said, I'm already still fighting a headache. What happened to the United Way's DEI team? Well, apparently they became irrelevant. The United Way reorganized its staff in late 2022, placing Chief Financial Officer Blake Valentine. That sounds like a character from like a Harlequin romance novel. Blake Valentine in charge of the office's two-person DEI team, among others, according to testimony recorded as part of Smith's unemployment hearing. Smith recounted, under oath, that shortly after Valentine began supervising her and her deputy, Jasmine Harper, who is also Black, he asked a staff member who reported to him why Smith and Harper were hardly ever at work. Seems reasonable. The woman, whom Knox News is not naming because she is not directly involved in the case, thought the comment was not just wrong but discriminatory. She told Valentine so, recounted the incident to both Smith and Harper, and filed a complaint with company human research. Wait. How? We've got two employees, we're paying them gadzooks amount of money. Why are they never at work? Because the two ladies were Black, that's racist? Did he say something else? Did he add some kind of like racial slur to the whole thing? Or was just like, why are they never in the office? That's racist. Was she being a good ally? I bet this unnamed woman was being a really good ally and pointing out the discrimination when it was happening, calling it out. Quote, Valentine said to her that he had only witnessed Jasmine and I in the office, me 12 hours in December and Jasmine 6 hours in December, Smith recalled in the hearing. Quote, to which, name redacted, said to him, that's not true. I've seen both of them in the office longer than that, and there are other employees who I haven't seen in the office, and you didn't mention them, and that feels discriminatory because they are both Black females, unquote. So this lady's feelings in interpreting the supervisor's question is the basis for this entire lawsuit. Quote, there have been many other people who have been out, and I find it peculiar that Mr. Valentine would only mention the two Black women as his basis of, I haven't seen these people in the office, when in fact there are many employees who have been out, several white people, Smith said in the hearing. Well, you weren't there for the conversation, right? So you're just telling us what you heard from someone else. So him bringing up to a white woman the only two Black women in the racial equity office, he brought us up to a white woman, never bringing up another employee, and it wasn't even accurate, unquote. But you weren't there for this Isn't she just like telling somebody else's story at that point? Okay, Smith filed a complaint with United Way's Human Resources in February 2023 and requested a different manager to oversee her work. Well, let me ask, was Valentine, who was Valentine supervising again? Hold on. Okay, so Blake Valentine was put in charge of the office's two-person team. A two-person team that he never saw in the office. He wasn't overseeing the whole organization. He was overseeing that aspect of it. So how is he supposed to know who is and isn't showing up for their job if he's not their direct supervisor? This sounds like nonsense to me. Let's see. The company immediately began an investigation into the allegations and within a couple of weeks determined the complaint was unfounded and unsubstantiated and that the employees had not been singled out. Yeah. Instead, the investigators concluded United Way managers were determining new areas of responsibility after the restructure, interim CEO Armstrong Brown told Knox News. Look, this sounds like to me United Way got scared of being called racist because their entire thing is trying to look not racist. And so somebody said they were racist and they didn't want to admit fault because there was no fault to be had here, but they also wanted the problem to go away. So they paid her off $104,000. And then it was like, oh, now you got to pay her unemployment too for being fired for cause for not showing up to work. Even though you already rewarded her for not showing up to work, now you got to pay her unemployment. They're like, we don't want to. And you're like, well, you have to. The end. All sounds like BS to me. BS, someone trying to get a payday and become a victim over nothing. Didn't want to show up to work. I don't know. If you're I am fortunate enough, if you want to call it fortunate, depending on the circumstances. If you're fortunate enough to be able to work from home like perpetually and there's no problem, congratulations. A lot of places, they don't do that anymore. Or you get a little half and half. But if you don't show up to work at all and you're expected to show up to work, why do you expect to be paid? Oh, because I'm a victim. I see. Alan Thyler, good morning. A couple more comments here before I wrap things up, before my head decides to explode. Let's see. Walter Tomaszewski, the racist settlement was wrong, but the UW needed to pay UB. Yes. That's true. That's probably true. Yeah, they shouldn't have paid her off in the first place. $104,000 for what? Like, I don't understand the rationale there, except you're trying to pay her off to be quiet. Like, stop complaining, basically. Stop accusing us of racism when there was no racism, but we know that the optics are bad. That's all it feels like to me. Susannu a la Richard, they were restructuring. That means a bulk of people were losing their work. Yeah. You know, they probably overhired, or they didn't have enough work to go around. They were paying people too much. Yeah. That's all that means. They hired more than they had work to do or overpaid people who weren't doing enough. So there you go. Well, anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here because, like I say, I got... man, it's not a migraine yet, but it feels like it might get there. But either way, a couple of notes before I go on. Would you like to join the Discord server? Well, I have a Discord server. If you'd like to join the Discord server, I'm putting a link to the Discord server in the chat right now. All you have to do is click on that link. You'll find yourself on the landing channel called Say Hello. And in addition to saying hello, you just have to say the secret word. The secret word will tell me you're not a bot, have watched the stream, and have thus earned the right, the privilege, the entitlement to join the Discord server. And today's secret word is sit in. Just say hello, sit in, and I'll know that you watched the show. Outside of that, you can find me here on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for TED Excellence, where I'll take a look at another off-brand TED Talk for enlightenment and entertainment. Like last week when we looked at the menstrual cycle as a superpower. Yeah, that's a thing that happened, and it wasn't the first time. So take a look at that if you'd like, or wait for Thursday for the next one. Who knows what the subject will be? Well, I will before you do, but that'll probably be on Wednesday night. Outside of that, you can find me here again on Friday at 11:30 a.m. Pacific Time, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time for another edition of DEI Deathwatch. We'll take a look at the latest news in the downfall and the doubling down of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you can also find me here on Sundays at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern for the Sunday stream, where I talk about other news stories, not directly DEI related, that may have happened over the course of the week that I found interesting. Boy, I might be overbooking myself. Oh yeah, I'm also on Midnight's Edge, like 3 mornings a week, because I just crave the attention, I suppose. I'm not so sure. Angelverse, hello. See you later, Angelverse. Either way, everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things, even though everyone here is so well behaved. You have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated either to myself or to the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, link pinned to the top of the chat box. Thank you guys for your generosity. Very much appreciated. On the way out, if you'd leave a like and or share this and or a comment if you're watching in the future, I'd appreciate that as well. But everyone, have a good rest of your Monday. Have a good rest of your week ahead of you. For those of you not feeling well, like Keeverdam, I hope you feel well soon. And if you're not well, please get well soon, because I just repeated myself and trying to do my outro because I'm awkward like that. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.